Hey guys, today we're going to be taking a look at reins. We're going to look at the different types of reins, how to handle them, and some safety reminders. So let's start by just looking at some different types of reins that you're going to see at our barn or out in the horse world. So there's really kind of two main groups of rein. You'll have a connected rein, a loop rein, which could be like an English style rein that is connected at a buckle. That might be like our rainbow reins, which are a rubber grip connected at a buckle, like an English rein. You'd see a roping rein where it's a loop here, all connected together. This one's made of rope. So those are kind of one family of rein. And the other type of rein is a split rein. And that is two completely separate pieces of leather. As you can see, they are not connected like the reins we were just looking at. They're two totally separate pieces of leather. So that's a split rein. There are tons and tons of different materials reins can be made of, different ways that they attach to the bit, different widths, weights, grips, all of that stuff. There's a whole bunch. The style of rein you want to use is based on what discipline you're doing. So like I said, there's kind of some more English style, more Western style, but if you're doing barrel racing or roping, you're going to use a different style of rein than if you're going to be doing cutting or like reining and things like that. So there's a whole lot of variety. Let's take a quick look at how to hold different types of rein. We'll start with a connected rein, like a braided rein or rainbow reins. There are two ways that our students hold the reins here. We often start with what's called a driving rein. This is called a driving rein because this is how you would hold the reins if you were driving a cart. But this is also a great way to start learning how to ride because it teaches you to use the reins without like bracing through your wrists or your elbows. And the way that you hold a driving rein is the part that's connected to the horse's mouth that goes to the bit, runs through the top of your index finger underneath your thumb, and the other end of the rein that loops around goes out underneath your pinky. So this is called a driving rein. We eventually want to transition our riders into the traditional way of holding reins, which is where the loop of the rein that connects with the buckle comes out over the top of the index finger and under the thumb, and the part that connects to the horse's mouth goes between the pinky and the ring finger. Hold it in a fist just like this. This style of holding the reins gives you really nice feel in your fingers. You're really connected with the horse's mouth through the sensitive part of your fingers. Just little squeezes can be felt by both you and the horse. And this is the way that you'll need to hold reins if you ever go and show or do any formal activities. In the rainbow reins, it looks quite similar. A lot of our students begin in a driving rein, but will eventually want to progress to your traditional rein hold between the pinky and the ring finger coming out over the thumb. Split reins get a little bit more complicated. So one safety thing to remember if you're riding with split reins is you should always have hold of both reins at all times. You can be holding them in one hand, but you don't want to let go of one rein because it's not connected to the other. So you don't want it to fall off the side of your horse's neck while you're riding and have only one rein. So there's a couple ways we can hold split reins. If you're riding two-handed, which is what most of our students do, and we're often riding in snaffle bits, is you bridge your reins. And we call that because our reins connect between our hands, even though it's two separate pieces of leather. We are holding both reins in both hands with a bridge across the middle. The important thing to remember when you bridge your reins is to make sure that you have enough material in between your hands that as you're riding, you can use each hand independently. If you hold your bridged reins pretty close together, then you can't take one hand away from the other. They're a little bit too attached. So you do want to have a bit of distance so that your hands can operate independently. You can see that when I have a bridged rein, the part that's going to connect to the horse's mouth is going between my ring finger and my pinky, just like the other style rein. And then the tail end just kind of hangs out under my pinky. So this is how you would hold your bridged rein. You can see that if, in case of an emergency, if I let go with one hand, I've still got both reins in the other hand. So the other way that we can hold split reins, which is the traditional way that you'd hold them to ride one-handed with a curb bit with a shank, is like so. So one of the reins is going to go across my palm between my middle finger and my index finger, and the other rein lays on top of the index finger with my thumb on top. And as I'm riding the tail of my rein, both pieces go on the same side of the horse's neck and drapes across like that. So this is if I'm riding one-handed. I only need to lift and slightly move my hand to communicate with the bit. This is how you would ride if you were going to show Western in a good number of disciplines. So that's the other way we hold split reins. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about leading horses with the reins or using them when you're on the ground, and some safety reminders. So let's take a look at split reins. Red is helping me out as my model here. So as you can see, the split reins are two entirely disconnected pieces of leather. So when I'm leading and I've got both of them down off of Red's neck like I do right now, I hold both of them in each hand, and that way I've got good control. When I'm leading, I don't want to have my hand choked way up under the horse's chin and mouth. It puts weird pressure on the bit. They don't like it. They don't like it in a halter and lead rope either. So we want it to just be really natural, give them a little space to move their head around. And I can lead them like normal, sort of treat the reins a little bit like a lead rope. In split reins, there's another option to put one rein over the horse's neck. The way that I'm going to do that, make sure my reins aren't on the ground, is I reach around Red's neck and hand the rein to myself to lay it across his neck. So you can leave the off rein, the rein on the farther side from you, over the horse's neck and just lead with one rein. This is pretty typical, but it is really important that you pay attention to what's going on with that rein that's loose over the horse's neck. If it drapes a little bit too long, it can become a safety hazard. It could slide off all the way and get stepped on. If he put his head down, it might slide up behind his ears and fall off forward. So you do want to be paying close attention to what's going on with that rein all the time. But that honestly goes for split reins in general. Even when you're putting them over your horse's neck because it's time to get on, you want to adjust them so they're short enough that you'd be able to actually use your reins with your hand right away. If the rein is really long and draped like that, you don't have a whole lot of tail end kind of holding the reins over your horse's neck. They could easily slip that way. And if I were to gather these up and try to use them as I got on, they're way too long to do any good. They're not communicating with my horse, so you do want them to stay at a reasonable length as you get ready to mount and dismount. Let's take a quick look at looped reins, connected reins, English reins, roping reins, whatever you want to call them. So these are, unlike split reins, one solid piece that makes a full loop. So when I'm leading my horse, the same things apply as the split reins really, where I want to have decent slack between my hand and where it's attached to the bit, and I hold the loose end in my other hand so it's up off the ground rather than leading them around where I could get a foot through or Red could get a foot through, so we keep it up off of the ground. It is not recommended in reins like this that you lead your horse with them on the ground while the reins are over the horse's head. And there's a few reasons for this. One is it's kind of awkward. The way you'd have to hold them is a little bit closer to the horse's chin and doesn't give them a whole lot of room to move their head around. So they don't always love it, even if you're just kind of grabbing one rein at a time. But another is that this is kind of a dangerous position for the reins to be in if your horse were to suddenly get loose. Seems great that they're up over the horse's neck, but what really would probably happen is they'd slide down, come off of one side. The horse could easily get their leg through this, and they'd be a little bit more hung up in these than they might be if they're just kind of loose on the ground, where in an emergency you do have a little bit more material to work with, some space. General safety reminder with reins would be to just never let them be on the ground. You don't want to be dropping them all the way down like that while you're getting your horse ready or having them stand and wait for you. And the biggest reason is they could get stepped on and tangled up in the horse's legs or stepped on by a person. And if the horse jerks their head up or spooks, the reins are directly connected to their mouth. Even if you're not using a bit and you're using a hackamore, the reins are attached to some of the most sensitive parts of a horse's body. So we always want to be mindful of what will happen if a horse spooks and we have hold of the reins. That's also why we never tie a horse up with reins, ever. And you never want to attach the reins to anything solid. You don't want to tie them to your saddle. You don't want to tie them up to the wall with it or a hitching post. We never tie with our reins. These are only for riding, so they should only ever be in our hands. Same safety rules apply for a rein style like this as the split reins. We don't want to be dropping them on the ground. You also never want, in any style rein, for you to be attached to your horse by the reins. And what I mean by that is you should never loop reins around your hand, where if the horse were to pull really quickly, your hand would be caught up in it. You also never want to do anything like put the reins over your neck while they're attached to your horse in any way, be looped around. If your horse suddenly spooks and runs off, it would be a true disaster. You'd probably have a hospital visit. So we want to be really safe and make sure that the reins are only ever attached to the horse and our hands, where we can let go if something needs to happen.
When we say lengthening and shortening reins, what we're referring to is the distance between your hands and the horse's mouth on the reins. So a shorter rein has a little bit less rein between your hand and the bit, and a longer rein has more rein between your hand and the bit. It's a little looser, a little more slack.
If you wanted to shorten or lengthen your reins in a driving rein, you could easily kind of crawl your fingers along, almost like eating the reins to get closer to the horse's mouth, and do the opposite to lengthen them. Another option might be to reach over, hold the reins in one hand while you slide the reins down a little bit farther, and do that on both sides. Those are all ways to shorten and then lengthen your reins in a driving rein. To shorten up the reins while holding them like this, similarly, we can kind of crawl your fingers along the reins just a little bit to shorten it up slightly. And to lengthen it, it's the same. You almost feed the reins through with your thumb. You can also reach across, hold the reins in one hand while you slide your hand down, hand the other rein over, and do the same thing. Shorten the reins. You can take your hands along the rein like so. You can also reach over and pull your hand down by holding the reins in one hand and then the other. And to lengthen, we just let them out. If we're going to be shortening and lengthening our reins in a bridge, similar. So I can kind of feed the reins between my fingers to shorten and go back the other way. The other way that we could do that is if you hold a little bit of a firmer grip on one hand so that you can slide your other hand down the rein, and then do the same thing. I'm holding a little bit more firmly with my left hand so I can slide the right farther down. But the important thing to remember with that style of lengthening your reins is you're going to get even more material in between your bridge. So if you ever want to readjust how much you have between your hands, you can let go of each tail so you've only got the part connected to your horse's mouth. Reach across and slide through again to your desired distance. To shorten up your reins in a split rein with this style hold, what you can kind of crawl your fingers along just like the other way. You can also grab the tail and slide your hand down